Thank you very much. My name is Peter Hutchinson. I work for the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment, and I've been primarily responsible for the development of renewable heat policy in Northern Ireland for the last number of years, and really the sort of setting of targets for renewable heat generation in Northern Ireland and incentive measures to try and reach those targets. So I really just want to talk briefly about why Northern Ireland has set targets for renewable heat, what they are and what the background is to them, how we are trying to reach those targets, and then some information on the policy measures that we've introduced over the last couple of years in Northern Ireland. Generally speaking, and has been discussed before, there's a big driver across the EU to promote renewable energy, and that's definitely a big driver for the Northern Ireland executive to move forward on renewable energy. And basically, the EU has committed itself to sourcing 20% of all its energy from renewable sources by 2020. And each member state has a share and have to reach that share. And the UK target is therefore 15%, and GB has set targets of 12% renewable heat by 2020 and 30% renewable electricity by 2020. Now, whilst Northern Ireland obviously is not a member state, we do need to contribute to the wider UK target, and therefore the Strategic Energy Framework, which was published in 2010, sets targets of 10% renewable heat by 2020 and 40% renewable electricity, and then we have interim targets of 4% and 15% by 2015 respectively. But it's not really just the driver is the objective is the target, but there are other benefits and other drivers that why we want to promote renewable energy in Northern Ireland, and we see that as being an over-reliance on imported fuel, especially in the heat sector, where over 99% of our heating market is made up of imported fossil fuels. And that has an impact in terms of Northern Ireland not being in control of energy prices, and also increased levels of fuel poverty in Northern Ireland given the heavy reliance on heating oil. And therefore promoting renewable heat means we can become more self-sufficient. We can also reduce carbon emissions, become greener, and promote jobs in this sector. As being touched upon, there are potential opportunities for growers of biomass, suppliers of technology, installers, and we do need a new sort of skills market in terms of the renewable heat sector, as Trevor was pointing out from his work on Invest NI. So overall, the objective is to reach 10% renewable heat by 2020, and in doing so, hopefully promoting a more sustainable, a more secure, a more diverse, and a more competitive heat market in Northern Ireland compared to what we currently have. Just by way of comparison, the Northern Ireland heat market compared to the GB heat market and where we were, this is based on 2010 figures. But basically, the Northern Ireland heat market is slightly more than 3/4 reliant on oil, with an emerging natural gas market of about 17–18%, with future plans to extend that market further into the west of Northern Ireland. And then the remaining 3 or 4% is really made up of coal, electricity and renewable heat. So in 2010 we had a baseline of 1.7% renewable heat, and most of that, the vast majority of that, was from biomass heating, given sort of the experience of biomass in Northern Ireland and Ireland as a whole. The GB market, which is also incentivising renewable heat, is very different from Northern Ireland. They've got a very small oil sector, about 10%, whereas a very large natural gas market, close to 80% of their heat comes from natural gas. And therefore, the incentives that GB have introduced are really trying to displace natural gas primarily, whereas Northern Ireland's incentives are designed to displace oil primarily. So in 2010 we set a target of 10% renewable heat by 2020, and that really meant an additional 1.6 terawatt hours of renewable heat, or an additional 1.3 accounting of existing levels. We said in 2010 that we basically had about 300 gigawatts of renewable heat. The overall heat demand then was 17.4, but we would see a reduction in that to 2020, as really improvements in thermal efficiency would outweigh any kind of new development. So we set an estimate that our heat level, our heat demand, would be about 16.7 renewable terawatt hours in 2020, and therefore we need an additional 1.3 or 1.4 terawatt hours of renewables. To set in context the scale of that target, it would be, to achieve it through the domestic market alone, we would need to install roughly 12,000 new domestic renewable heat technologies on an annual basis to 2020. That would be to secure the target on the domestic market alone. So close to maybe 90,000 domestic properties would need to be converted, which is a significant level. So therefore, to achieve the target, we really need a mix of domestic, a mix of commercial and public sector buildings to convert over to renewable heat in order to achieve this. Just really by way of indication, this is where we need to go to get to 2020, starting off at 300 gigawatt hours in 2010 up to 1,600 in 2020. Basically, we need to quadruple where we are now in the next 6 years to try and achieve this target. And there's a number of reasons why this is really quite an ambitious and quite a challenging target. Renewable heat, as has been discussed, really is still in its infancy. Renewable electricity has been incentivised in Northern Ireland since 2004 and has seen an increase from about 4% to about 15% currently. It's well established. People understand technologies like wind, solar PV, and AD is now becoming a more established technology. The renewable heat side of things has been less well understood, possibly. Biomass is possibly the exception, but technologies like heat pumps, solar thermal, deep geothermal are still very well sort of untried and untested. As part of this, we need to improve awareness of the technologies, understanding of the technologies, how they work, and what the benefits are. We need to encourage the market to provide new jobs and new skills in this sector. And we really need companies and commercial operations to understand the benefits of moving across, and some of them have been outlined by previous speakers in terms of ongoing fuel savings. We've run some TV campaigns and outdoor advertising to try and promote the use of renewable heat and try and explain it at a very high level to consumers, so that will need to continue to support this target. The main driver to achieve the target has a financial mechanism, really, the Renewable Heat Incentive, which was launched in November 2012 for the non-domestic sector, as well as some support for the domestic sector in terms of a grant payment, the Renewable Heat Premium Payment Grant, which was launched in May 2012. Now, you may wonder, why do we need to provide financial incentives? Because, as has been outlined, biomass in particular compared to home heating oil, you have significant savings already, 50, 60% possibly of your savings. But we find that the initial capital costs of renewable technologies mean that they're still quite prohibitive, and then there's other barriers that have been talked about in terms of understanding. It's a behavioural change for some people. The concept of putting in a heat pump, digging up your garden or digging up premises to put this in. There means there's a number of factors that, even though in many scenarios it's cost effective, installers will not take this step without a financial incentive. So the premium payment scheme is currently operating for domestic customers with support ranging from £320 to £3,500 depending on the technology. And the RHI provides, rather than an upfront grant, it's an ongoing financial support mechanism where support lasts for the lifetime of the technology to a maximum of 20 years, with tariffs really designed to cover the additional costs of renewable heat, really trying to spread out those capital costs and factor in those sort of non-financial costs as well, and give a return on investment to make it worthwhile and attractive. Just by illustration, these are the tariffs that are currently in place for the non-domestic market in Northern Ireland. So the tariffs are banded by technology and they're banded by size. And then we award a pence per kilowatt hour figure towards, so for biomass, for a large sort of, or medium scale biomass system over 100 kilowatts, be a penny and a half pence per kilowatt hour, and once it drops below that, it's closer to 6 pence per kilowatt hour, showing that the increase in size makes things more cost effective already, and the more fuel you're buying, the greater savings you're making, and therefore the more cost effective the project. So technology is currently supported are ground source heat pumps, biomass, biomethane, and solar thermal. And just to explain maybe in more detail, how we come up with these tariffs is basically the RHI is trying to compensate investors for all the additional costs of renewable heat, and that's, as I said, the capital costs, maybe financing costs, the barrier costs, if there's any difference in fuel or operating costs. And we look at, what would oil cost you in one scenario, what would renewables cost you in the other scenario, what's the difference, and we try and boil that down to a pence per kilowatt hour cost figure. And then a rate of return is included to stimulate interest, and that's at about 12%. The rate of return is added in. Because it is an unknown marketplace, because financing for these projects is difficult, and because it is maybe a big behaviour change for some customers. Payments are made on a quarterly basis for the lifetime of the technology, and once the installation is accredited by Ofgem, the GB energy regulator, that's what your tariff will be for the lifetime of the technology. The only change would be an annual adjustment with RPI. Basically, what we're trying to do is make renewables as attractive, if not more attractive, than on oil. So people who are on oil, there's a good incentive for them to move across to renewable technology. Just to provide an update on where we are to date with the scheme, the commercial scheme's been running for about 12 months, just over 12 months, and the domestic scheme running for slightly longer, and close to 30 megawatts of new renewable heat capacity has been installed in Northern Ireland to date. 100 in the commercial sector, actually I think that's more now, it's about 120, and close to 850 domestic installations. Biomass really is the fuel of choice, which is different from GB, where there's a lot of heat pumps going in. Solid biomass is the fuel of choice in Northern Ireland, with all of the commercial systems going into place so far have all been biomass, though there are some large ground source heat pumps ones currently being installed, and nearly half of the domestic installations being biomass. So there's probably, in the last 12 months, close to 22, 23 megawatts of new biomass capacity installed in Northern Ireland on the heat side of things. The uptake in the Northern Ireland scheme has been positive compared to the GB scheme. When we compare the first sort of 14 months of both of the schemes, which the RHI in GB and the RHI in Northern Ireland, we see that the RHI in Northern Ireland has been about 6.5% of applications compared to GB, 7% of accreditation, and 4.2% of heat capacity has been installed. The Northern Ireland heat market compared to GB is about 2.83%, so that's where we'd expect to be, trailing GB about 3%. So anything north of 3% shows that the NI scheme is performing well. I suppose there's a number of factors of that. Some have been touched on. Trevor pointed out that Northern Ireland has a good history in terms of companies involved in this sector. Biomass is well established to a certain extent compared to in GB. The fact that we're on displacing oil means that the high energy cost of oil means a jump to renewables. The jump is less than it would be in GB, where people are jumping from gas to renewables. Also, the fact people are on oil means the behaviour change is perhaps less because people are used to buying fuel in bulk, storing it, and filling up every couple of months like you would do for biomass. The natural gas market slightly more different how it works. So Northern Ireland is well placed to promote renewables and particularly promote biomass. On the domestic side of things, it's even more positive compared to GB. We're about 10 or 12% of applications in Northern Ireland compared to the GB scheme, showing that domestic customers largely, maybe outside the Greater Belfast area, are really switched on to the potential of renewable heat, and a lot of interest in moving across. To date, the premium payment scheme, the domestic one, has committed about £2.2 million and has paid out £1.3 million. And the value of all the applications that we've received, about 1,500 applications, is about £7.2 million in terms of what the quoted cost of the installation is. So that £2.2 million committed is bringing forward investment in this sector of about £7.2 million. So it certainly is growing quite significantly, and we need to do that to continue to do and increase further if we're to secure our targets. In terms of the next steps of the policy, and just talk briefly on that, so you know where we're going in Northern Ireland with this, is we do plan to introduce a domestic RHI, so taking that grant scheme that we have at the minute and almost moving it across to a scheme where yes, you might receive some upfront support, but a lot of the support would be in ongoing years, similar to how the commercial scheme operates at this stage. And we consulted in the summer on that, and we proposed that people would receive an ongoing payment for 7 years, rather than the commercial scheme where 20-year payments are maybe more the norm, and people are used to that under the narrow, the electricity mechanism. We feel that domestic customers, 20 years is perhaps too long a payback time, or too long an incentive payment period. Because people may want to move house, they don't know if they're going to be in the same property for 5, 10, 15 years, and to try and reduce the cost to government in terms of paying this money out. So we consulted on 7 years. That really means that we're paying out what we would have been paying you out over the 20 years, but we're paying it to you quicker. And we want to expand the commercial scheme further to include new technologies, and some of them that we've consulted on is introducing a tariff for large biomass over 1 megawatt of heat. Previous analysis had shown that over a megawatt we felt that it was already fairly cost effective, and therefore government incentive was not required. However, we've looked at those assumptions again, and we've consulted on a tariff of about 0.6 pence for systems over a megawatt. We also want to introduce support for air source heat pumps and deep geothermal and combined heat and power. We also have discussed, simplifying the metering arrangements for non-domestics. Currently, if you're into the non-domestic scheme, everything must be metered, and payments are based on metered heat output. We want to try and simplify that, to try and remove that barrier to people. And we also consulted on a potential uplift tariff for district heating schemes or community heating schemes, where one boiler might be heating a number of different premises or a lot of homes. There are, of course, additional costs involved in terms of the capital, in terms of pipe work, and therefore we've tried to develop a tariff that really accounts for those additional costs and try and see if district heating could take off in Northern Ireland. Some analysis would say about 30%, 40% of Northern Ireland's heat demand could be met by community heating or district heating schemes. However, there are significant barriers of doing so, and there have been some bad examples possibly of district heating in Northern Ireland that haven't worked out, not because of the technology, but because of potential other factors like the housing market have meant that some scenarios haven't worked as they should have done, and therefore we are keen to look at how we can support that. The domestic RHI will come first, undoubtedly, and we hope to say something fairly soon on that. We're just working through the approval process within the department and our finance colleagues, and then change to the non-domestic sector later in 2014, all being well. So that's really just a quick run through, why Northern Ireland are keen to promote renewable heat, where we're going with it, what the target is, what the incentive mechanisms are going to be like, and really what the benefits are going to be in Northern Ireland. But certainly there's been good progress to date. The last 12 months has been positive. We need to see more installations. We need to really see the market sort of taking this challenge forward. And the ones that have installed to date, there's a range of commercial applications: schools, hospitals, hotels, leisure centres, churches. There's a range of applications that these biomass boilers or other technologies can go into, and we want to see that increase in the next 12 months to 2020 to achieve this target. So thank you very much. And there's some contact details there.